Okay, so the final step to our narrative poem writing is to add in some alliteration. Now, when I was reading through my poem, I actually realised, oh wow, I've already added in some alliteration without even meaning to. So some of these words here, the letters I've highlighted in red because it tells me that I've actually used some alliteration without meaning to. So here, ready to watch the sunrise at the summit. So we wrapped up warm. Since it was so steep, the slate grey, sharp rocks. So some of you, when you are adding in alliteration year 4, you will realise that you probably might not have to add in too much. Sometimes we add it without even meaning to. But let's explore some more about what alliteration is, because we've looked at it, but let's remind ourselves. So alliteration is where there is a series of words and the start of the words begin with the same consonant or syllabic sound. For example, here, can you see what sound or letter is being repeated to create this alliteration? Busy buzzing, the bee behaved beautifully. Do you know which letter it was? That's right, it was the letter B. Well done. So here they have created alliteration. And alliteration doesn't really make your writing much better in terms of the way it's wrote, but it can help to add expression, particularly with when you are writing poems. So you might think, oh, Miss Newman, why do we need it then if it doesn't add depth or meaning to your writing? But it does make it sound better. Sometimes when you have alliteration, it can make your writing sound more engaging and more entertaining. It makes it nicer to read and it makes you feel a bit happier when you read it because you know that the poet or the writer has tried really hard to make it engaging. And when your writing engages the reader, the audience, they're more likely to remember what you say. Here's another example here. Larry's leaping lizard. What do you think is the alliteration here? That's right, it's the L letter, isn't it? Larry's leaping lizard. You can see my lips and my tongue. Larry's leaping lizard. Fantastic. So the final part to our little recap on alliteration is how to use it. Because you might be thinking, we've already written our poem. How on earth can we include alliteration now? Well, what you can do is you can reread your poem and see what words you can tweak or change a little bit to give them the same letter at the start to give alliteration. Because alliteration is a technique that gives sentences a lot more description or humour and even energy to when you read it. And what you can do is you can play around with these words, you can change them, you can alter them to help your words become alive. So here's a final one that we can have a look at and think, what is the sound or the letter that they are repeating to create this alliteration? Make a mountain out of a molehill. I think it's the letter O. No, it's not, is it? I can see lots of you saying, no, it's not. It's the letter M. Make a mountain out of a molehill. Fantastic. So as I showed you before, in the words that are highlighted with the letters red, I have already accidentally included some alliteration. Here's another one here. She plodded along painfully. So painfully, since it was so steep, okay? What I would like you to do is think of 2 or 3 lines of your poem that you think would be easy to change to add alliteration. Here's a little tip. I would probably choose some lines that might be close together, but also include some lines that don't have any of our other features in. For example, in this verse here, I've got my rhyme, time and climb. I've got some of my alliteration, sunrise at the summit, and I've also got dialogue. In here, I've got my imagery, and I've got some rhyme here, sunrise, eyes. Here, I've got some dialogue, and I've got some repetition, then I moaned. Then she moaned. Here, I've got a little bit of rhyme and I've got some imagery, and you can see how I've started to analyse my stanzas or my verses to see and to figure out, well, what have I included in this part? What perhaps do I need to include elsewhere? And when I was doing that, I came to the end and thought, the part that I've really not really taken that much interest into changing is my introduction. Now, sometimes we forget about our introduction because we sometimes just think, oh, it's there, it's the introduction, it doesn't need any more. But sometimes it does need more because don't forget year 4. The introduction is the main part. It's the main part that the reader is going to read first. That decides whether the reader wants to read on. So, if you have an introduction like mine where you haven't included many of these features, perhaps that would be a good place for you to start. Now, I've highlighted my introduction here because these are the 3 lines that I'm going to really take a closer look at. So I'm going to start by reading them and thinking, what letter have I used more than any others so far? So, when I was travelling around Indonesia, I can see that this letter W is one that I've been using only twice, but I could probably get another W round. And then I'm thinking, oh, I've used this verb travelling. Maybe I could change that to a verb that starts with a W. What verbs might start with a W? What doing words? Walking, wandering. Maybe I could use one of those. So that's in the back of my mind. Then I'm going on to my next line. My friend and I decided to hike Mount Batur. Now, there's nothing in here that really strikes out to me and thinking, oh, you've already repeated this, why don't you keep doing that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my verb again, decided, and try and change that to match another word. And I'm thinking here that maybe because this word decided is next to my word hike, that I could try and make this word decided start with a H. My friend and I decided to hike Mount Batur. What's another word for decided that might begin with a H? So you can see here my thought processes. I did decide to use wandering, and instead of decided, I chose happened. So now I have some alliteration in my first paragraph. When I was wandering around Indonesia, my friend and I happened to hike Mount Batur. I also had some unintentional alliteration here, an active volcano located in Bali, Indonesia. So you can see I've only used 2 or 3 words in each of my sentences to actually choose to include alliteration, and that's okay. Okay. As with the final feature that we didn't look at in detail, this chatty language, the colloquial language, I think I mentioned in part 1 that we did include that as part of our dialogue. That is like chatty language, isn't it? Okay, so your task today, I've done a lot of talking today, so now it's your turn to wow me with your final poem. So your task is to complete your poem. Finish it, make it done. Adding between 3 to 4 expanded noun phrases to create imagery. So using those expanded noun phrases you created in the first part of this lesson, really make them make sense in your poem. And also adding alliteration to at least 3 of your sentences. So I would suggest doing it to your introduction like I have, because that will probably be the most easiest. Then practice your poem, read it out loud, tell your family members, tell your friends if you can, if they're with you, or you can call them online or something like on Zoom. Change or add anything that you think might need changing. This checklist will be included in your resources so you can see if you need to change anything. Then, the most important thing, think of a title for your poem. What are you going to call it? What's going to be interesting? Then, when you've done all of those 3 things, send in your poem and a recording of yourself saying the poem. Don't forget to use intonation and volume like we practiced in the first few lessons. So I know that Frankie has been really super during the first few lessons of our narrative poem unit, and he actually sent in a lovely video of himself having recorded in himself reading one of the poems when we were practicing that intonation and volume. So well done, Frankie. I'm looking for so many more of those today for our next marking session, year 4, which will be on Monday. Okay, so I chose to call mine The Climb. So I'm going to practice reading it to you using my intonation and volume. When I was wandering around Indonesia, my friend and I happened to hike Mount Batur, an active volcano located in Bali, Indonesia. This sounded exciting at the time, but then she told me, wake up at 1:30 a.m. to make the climb, so that we can arrive ready to watch the sunrise at the summit. The sweet, golden sunrise in front of my eyes, an unbeatable feeling. Then I moaned, "I'm going to be absolutely exhausted." She replied, "So will I, but the view will be breathtaking." So we wrapped up warm from head to toe. The crisp, fresh air was blowing all around as we began to take a leisurely hike up the volcano. We had to take it easy since it was so steep. Halfway up to the top, my friend began to weep. Then she moaned, "Ah, I've broken my ankle." She didn't break her ankle. She had just taken a funny turn on one of the slate grey sharp rocks beneath her. Will she ever learn? Minutes later she plodded along, painfully, as she said to herself, "It will be breathtaking. Come on." Finally, it took 2 hours to climb, but when we got up to the top, the view was breathtaking. We met a little friend, so we had to stop. So have a think about how my intonation and volume was used there. Okay, Year 4. So that is your task for today, making sure that you have finished all of your poem using all of the features that you can see. Okay? Really, really looking forward to reading these poems, Year 4. I cannot wait to hear all your lovely voices using that intonation, going higher or lower when it's needed, quieter or louder when it's needed too, okay? Have a lovely rest of your day and I will see you in our next lesson. Goodbye, Year 4. Have a lovely day.